We all have bad habits, but most of us have the ability to control them, while for others, they end up warping their brains, affecting personal relationships, and occasionally skewing their thought process to the point of no return. Traditionally, addiction is characterized as a chronic, relapsing disorder brought upon by compulsive drug seeking and consumption despite adverse consequences. But of course, there are other ways to consume which may cause you to become dependent, and one rapper who knows this all too well is Kanye. As he said in various interviews, Ye's affinity for adult material dates back to when he was just 5 years old when he stumbled upon something of his father's.
Like for me, Playboy was my gateway into full-on addiction. My dad had a Playboy left out at age 5, and it's affected almost every choice I made for the rest of my life from age 5.
Having made various crude references to that industry from his earliest music, Kanye's appetite eventually bled into the dating world too when he dated one of the most sought-after glamour models of the era. While stopping short at dating a literal adult performer, his decision to date Amber Rose took his life and his music into a newly liberated, hypersexualized era. Having later claimed that he needed 30 showers, his relationship with Amber, alongside the fallout from the infamous Taylor Swift VMAs moment, would be funneled into his work, resulting in the masterpiece we know today as My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, an album which featured his most outlandish descriptions of sexual escapades to date. Things came to a head on tracks like Monster, Runaway, Blame Game, and of course, Hell of a Life. On the latter, it's often suggested that he foretold his future marriage to Kim Kardashian, spitting, "One day I'm gonna marry a star. We'll have a big crib and a long yard. We'll have a mansion and some fly maids. Nothing to hide, we both screwed the bridesmaids." But before that prophecy was fulfilled, one of the collaborators on that project exposed his creative process and the deals which took her aback. Featured on 2 tracks on the album, including her career-defining verse on Monster, Nicki Minaj discussed what it was like to work with Ye. "I thought that he wouldn't want girls to be dressed overtly sexy, and I go into the studio and he had nothing but pictures of naked women on his computer that he'd invite me to look at. They were really artsy pictures, but you know, he loves so it was a complete shock to me, because I thought I had him figured all out. He was watching when we were in the studio. No shame in his game." Enabled by his megastar status, Ye's affinity for adult content was now accepted as just a part of his process, and may have contributed to his infatuation with the woman who was behind the most famous tape of all time, Kim Kardashian. When they first got together, this seemed like a point of pride for Ye, and on Click, he even made it part of his mythology, rapping, "Break records at Louis, ate breakfast at Gucci, my girl is superstar, all from a home movie." Over time, they went from a run-of-the-mill celebrity fling to a relationship that resulted in 4 kids. But, as he revealed on Jimmy Kimmel, even fatherhood wasn't enough to stop his addiction.
Do you feel like your attitude towards women has changed since having daughters?
Nah, I still look at and
What kind of stuff do you look at? What categories?
black is my favorite category. What's the point of being Kanye West if you can't?
In fact, he didn't even treat monogamy with any degree of seriousness. And while on the St. Pablo tour, he boasted about infidelity. It was no secret among those who worked closely with Ye that he cheated after Saint was born, revealed one insider. On his St. Pablo tour, he was flipping out in front of his team, confessing to sleeping with girls behind Kim's back. He even said he'd been groupies and went into insane detail about his sessions. It was disturbing. His language was unreal. Those who knew him well, they were sitting heads in hands and laughing nervously, while crew members who had just joined the tour were left stunned. At this point in his life, Ye's obsession with sex had arguably become more juvenile than ever. Across bars from The Life of Pablo that even made the most desensitized fan pause for a second, the famous video which featured figures like Taylor Swift, Kim K, George Bush, Trump, and Bill Cosby had placed his obsession front and center. But bizarrely, it was also around this time that he became most modest about Kim's sexuality. "Yeah, it does bother him. It's like half and half," she told Ellen of Kanye's response when she posed for Paper magazine. "He always wants me to be me and feel confident, and we're having fun, but it also bothers him." Still, as Kanye continued to live out his wildest fantasies in public view, he would reach a point of sordidness where he was even designing the set for the award ceremony for the biggest adult site on the internet. Upon reflection, he sees 2018, which is the same year that he began to alienate half of his fan base with his support of Trump, as the year his addiction finally began to have real ramifications for his life. Following the release of Ye, Kanye dropped 2 of the most sexually overt tracks in his entire catalog. First, there was Ecstasy, where he embraced all of his most debased impulses, no matter how the real people in his life might have felt about it. "You got sick thoughts? I got more of them. You got a sister-in-law you smashed? I got 4 of them. Damn, those is your sisters. You did something unholy to them pictures. Damn, you need to be locked up. Nah, we need a bigger hot tub." Then you had I Love It with Lil Pump. Debuting at the Hub Awards, the track was about as forthright about his love of all things explicit as it could get, and in hindsight, he saw it as a turning point in his life, and not for the better.
I got to a point where I was always letting that Playboy magazine that I found when I was 5 years old have an effect on my music. It could never be 100% everything it could be, because I had to add that in, always. And it got to the point where literally I went from Jesus Walks to You're Such a I Love It. This fit right in with everything we got that deal with opioids. This fit right in with everything we got that promotes killing so that we can have more slaves in the mass incarceration.
Why did you make it?
Because I was asleep, because I was drowned, because I was lost.
Having later described the track as a product of being lost, its release corresponded with a time where his marriage was on the rocks. In 2020, they revealed that they were speaking with an intimacy specialist, with an insider claiming that the therapist is giving them suggestions to put the sizzle back in their sex life. They tried counseling a couple of years ago, and it essentially saved their marriage. They're hoping lightning can strike twice. Once again, the problems in his life were traced back to sex and the media that documents it. And just as his addiction began to teeter over to the point that his marriage was heading for divorce, he put his faith into one of the other constants in his life: religion.
When I was in my lowest points, God was there with me and sending me visions and inspiring me. And I remember sitting in the hospital at UCLA after having a mental breakdown, and there's documentations of me drawing a church and writing start a church in the middle of Calabasas.
Soon, Kanye was abandoning secular music entirely, channeling his energy into spreading the gospel through his very own Sunday service. Along the way to promoting his new album, Jesus is King, most of his promo runs saw him discuss the difficulties he'd faced in trying to combat what had called out to him. Some people drown themselves in drugs, he said, and I drown myself in my addiction, sex.
God was patient, and my family was patient for me when they were praying for me. When they saw me at the awards, they couldn't tell me not to do it. All they could do was pray and be patient, and it had to happen in God's time. So for me, when I have people around who I would like them to be where I'm at in my journey, all I could do is pray and be patient, because it's gonna only be in God's time.
Transforming from a man who reveled in lust to a deeply religious man, Kanye spoke at length about the extreme way he tried to keep his religious purity.
This is gonna be radical. This time was where I was asking people to not have premarital sex while they were working on the album.
Despite only making gospel from here on out and pledging to live a pious life, it wasn't enough to save his marriage. And on the follow-up record, Donda, he discussed how his unfaithful behavior led to its demise on Hurricane, rapping, "Here I go acting too rich, here I go with a new chick, and I know what the truth is. Still playing after 2 kids. It's a lot to digest when your life's always moving." Having previously celebrated what he now saw as immoral, Kanye has since gone the other way and continued to place holiness at the forefront of his output. His views on the very material that he used to covet got increasingly extremist. In fact, he said it was to blame for everything that's gone awry in his life.
This addiction since I was 5 years old that has destroyed my mom and my dad's family, that destroyed my family. When I take full accountability for the destruction of my marriage, I'll point at the liberals and say, you took my wife from me. You know what took my wife from me? The fact that I was married to this beautiful person, but I felt like it wasn't enough. I felt like I still needed to look at in some way. I'd say to her, well, stop making these images, stop breaking the internet.
So alarmed by exposing his kids to inappropriate content that he didn't want them on TikTok, Ye sought to protect those around him from what he saw as the evil that destroyed his world. But at the same time, in the depths of his despair, he relapsed.
Since I lost my wife, since I lost my family, and I was no longer the priest right in the middle of that home, and I let the devil pull me in, next thing you know, I'm at New Year's Eve parties having threesomes.
But while Ye might have since tried to conquer his addiction, his over-reliance on the past was about to come back and bite him. With footage emerging of him showing X-rated material to executives during negotiations over his contract, it's clear that his addiction has tightened its grip around him again. He showed me the video of Francesca Lee, a buff adult, a former collaborator, told Rolling Stone. He's like, "What do you think of it?" Not laughing at all. He would be in a meeting and he'd be talking to you, and he'd rattle off in his laptop to play a mature video, another employee said. He's like, "I know it's uncomfortable, but I kinda need this in the background to keep me focused." From admitting that he bootlegged OnlyFans on Reddit despite being a billionaire, to announcing in November 2022 that he was going on a 30-day cleanse, it still hasn't prevented him from reverting back to his old ways. At his 46th birthday party in June 2023, he served sushi with women's bodies being used as serving platters. Meanwhile, he's engaged in no shortage of PDA with his new wife. while arguably inspiring some of his most compelling output in the My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy and Life of Pablo eras. It's clear that those images he saw as a kid are implanted in Ye's brain and aren't going anywhere. The real question is that as he considers a comeback, will he be able to douse the flames and keep himself on an even keel with his addiction, or allow it to wreak havoc once more? I guess we'll have to wait and see.